Hi, my name is Nicole Jacobs. I'm the Domestic Abuse Commissioner for England and Wales, and I'm really pleased to send along this video to you as you discuss at the Dare to Hope conference some of the issues that we could rightly address in terms of child victims of domestic abuse and their suitable housing accommodation. I just am really pleased to support the work of Shared Health in collaboration with the National Child Mortality Database, who are raising awareness of the number of children who have tragically died between 2019 and 2024, where temporary accommodation is listed as a contributing factor in their death. It's extraordinary, those numbers, and to stop and think about the tragedy of lives lost, that many children who've been lost in those circumstances. I don't know that there are really words to describe how concerning, how frightening, how tragic that truly is. And I'm just very grateful to Shared Health and the National Child Mortality Database for highlighting this for us all. We know that domestic abuse requires often, and we can debate about whether it should or not, but it absolutely, given the huge numbers and the prevalence of domestic abuse, it often requires changes in housing. I'm a huge supporter of whole housing approaches in relation to domestic abuse. If you haven't heard about that, please, you can really just Google, look that up, whole housing and domestic abuse. There's a range of work that's out there that addresses the kinds of work that we should be doing in various kinds of ways, not only refuge accommodation, but everything from street homeless through to mortgage and private ownership. Issues that relate to economic abuse, financial abuse in relation to domestic abuse, all of the kind of housing options that need to be improved and required. I think for too long we've thought domestic abuse refuge. That is absolutely a key need without any doubt, but there are many other issues, and that's some of what you'll talk about today. You might have seen that my office published a report called Victims in Their Own Right, and we had a question mark at the end of that title, and that is because domestic abuse is defined in the Domestic Abuse Act, the same act that created my office, it created our first statutory definition of domestic abuse, and it defined children as victims in their own right. And the report that I published in the last year had a suite of recommendations that had to be responded to government within 56 days as per the Domestic Abuse Act. They were a little bit over that deadline, but in any case, it spoke to the range of action that is actually required if you were to believe that we were making good on the commitment that we've made in that piece of legislation to define children as victims in their own right. One of the things I highlighted is the evidence that households made homeless as a result of domestic abuse should continue to be housed under the homelessness legislation, and any temporary accommodation provided meets the standard of the safe accommodation duty under Part 4 of the Domestic Abuse Act. In other words, children and adult victims should meet any kind of accommodation that they have as a result of moving in relation to domestic abuse should meet those standards. We work very hard, and many organizations work very hard to prove that they meet those standards, and that is absolutely what should be required. These are the kinds of asks that I hope I'll join with you, but also you'll join with me in demanding of this government. I support your ambition of ending the mixing of families and single victims of domestic abuse in shared accommodation, and the introduction of robust standards in all types of accommodation, temporary accommodation. It's vital that a notification policy also, or a protocol between local authorities, schools, and GPs for the purposes of information sharing and safeguarding of families in temporary accommodation exists. I've heard countless times, particularly from refuge providers, but others who work within temporary accommodation, how difficult it is to make those links. I've obviously heard from victims themselves, parents, mothers who've said how difficult these changes are. Think for a moment what it is like for that child to be uprooted in that way, to endure domestic abuse, full stop, but then have such changes all at one time, sometimes over and over, in order to remain safe, and how the system really lacks in that joined up coordination, person-centered approach in terms of what those needs are. We have to produce a homeless strategy that is cross-departmental in its ambition and is a flagship in terms of policies across government, linking with the violence and women against women and girls strategy, which of course we haven't seen published from government yet. I know I was only supposed to talk for a few minutes. I think I've gone well over that, but I hope you've understood my passion for this subject, my support for what you're doing. And I just thank you for allowing a few minutes for me to introduce myself for those of you who've never met me or my office, and really share and connect with you in terms of our the issues that we all clearly care about. So thank you again for your hard work. Let's keep talking. Let's keep making sure that we join up in our efforts to raise these issues and demand change. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.